Welcome to the Heart of Herbs Herbal School podcast, where we explore the fascinating world of herbal medicine and natural healing. I'm your host, Demetria Clark, and I'm thrilled to be your guide on this journey of discovery. At Heart of Herbs Herbal School, we're passionate about empowering individuals to harness the power of plants for health and wellness. Through our podcast, we'll dive into topics ranging from herbal materia medicas, clinical herbalism, sharing insights, interviews, tips, and wisdom to inspire and educate our listeners. Times in it. Hi, this is Demetria Clark, the director of Heart of Herbs Herbal School, and this is the Heart of Herbs Herbal School podcast. So, anyways, today we are talking to Jim McDonald, and I'm really excited because I don't think we've ever spoken before.
I do not think that we have.
And I don't think our paths have ever crossed. So I'm really excited about this. So thank you for being here today. Tell us where we can find you and all that fun stuff.
Well, to start with, I think the way that our paths have crossed that you don't know is I heard a podcast with you that Mason did. And you were on a podcast with Bevan Cohen, who's also here from Michigan. Cross paths with, and Bevan is like so super.
I love him. He's awesome.
He is such a really cool, down-to-earth, practical guy. And yeah, I've listened to you talk before, but yeah, I don't think we've looked at each other before, right? So my name's Jim McDonald. I teach in Southeast Michigan and also sort of like wherever people can get me to come out to if I can make it work. So that's been in different parts of the country, a few different parts of the world, which is kind of cool. I feel like I need like one more time before I can say like international teacher. But yeah, so I teach around different places if I can make it work. I have an in-person course that I do and an online course that I do called Lindera, just Lindera, because when I was trying to think of names, I wanted something that people wouldn't shorten down to, like old
Lindy.
anyway. And I basically I'm here because back in like I think it was like 94, I got into herbs and I just never stopped being interested in it. And when you get into something and you never stop doing it, provided you keep kind of pushing your edges, you sort of get deeper into it and a little bit more skilled at it. So I think that that's happened. And I have a lot of mason jars.
Cool.
Lots of jars and bottles accumulated over the decade.
So like 1994. How old are you?
I am 52. I just turned 52.
Oh, okay. So you're the same age as my husband.
Okay, cool.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So I was just trying to think like where I was in 94 in reference to my herbal kindler journey. And I was in New York, so that's cool. So, you teach, people invite you to teach all over the place. And today, I really want you to share with us some of the things that you like the most about teaching and some of the things that are challenging, because I feel like herbal education is changing really quickly right now. I remember when I started Heart of Herbs in 1998, and my first little GeoCities herb school page,
That
right?
is so awesome.
Right. I mean, my first herbal business was in 96 online, right? I was an early adopter to this technology, but everyone was like, this will never work. What is wrong with you? And I was like, I'm going to do it because I'm broke and I have to feed my kid and, all this kind of stuff, right? And then we're seeing, I think, that change again and shift again, and everyone's going to everything's on video. And I am not a video person. I am very shy. And like this podcast is actually my way of trying to make myself grow the fuck up, grow up and not be such a baby about stuff like that. Cause I'm actually really shy in real life. And so this is like something I've been working on, the one-on-one aspect. But that's another shift in teaching. And so it's just this like amazing to me that everything is changing so quickly, but staying the same so quickly too. What are your views on that?
I started teaching because so much of my teaching origins are like this. I started teaching because I kind of got nagged into it. I was going to a place. I was really interested in herbs. I got into it when I was in college. A friend left a book out, and I just started making stuff. And again, I never stopped making stuff, and so I have lots of
Mhm.
things now. And I was spending a bunch of time where there was a bonfire and barefoot people, and I realized that there
Wait, were
was.
there people drumming and the Grateful Dead
Oh
in the
yeah, absolutely.
background?
So there's a subset of people who don't automatically, when they're around a bonfire and they're not wearing shoes, look down to see where they're putting their feet, right? And so like people would step on embers and be like, ah. And if I was there, I'd be like, oh, hang on. I'd go and find something and be like, crush this up and put it on there, chew it up and put it on there. And after a while of doing that, someone was like, oh, you don't actually grab the same thing. That's not the same thing you grabbed last time. I was like, oh, well, that thing's not growing anymore because it's like later in the year or so. And also, I want to try different stuff out. And that place also, hosted classes and workshops. And so like, oh, you should teach something here. And I'm like, I don't know anything about teaching. Like I got nothing to like, I don't even know how I would do that. They kept asking and asking and asking and asking and asking. And I'm like, fine, okay, I'll do it. And so the first class I ended up doing was like a 7 hour herb walk. Um,
Holy moly.
yeah, yeah.
They
Actually,
get their money's worth.
it was $25. I think $20 if you were a member. We gave you food, you got a tincture. It was a really great deal for students and a really bad deal for me. I don't know. I was learning. It was okay. So I did that spring, summer, fall, and then I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. Like, actually, I like this. And people are asking me questions. And I think that at the time, and this would have been like the late 90s, how it worked for me is like there were a lot more people who would ask me questions and try out what my suggestions were than I had previously known. And so I was like, oh, this is a way to get more experience doing stuff, right? It's not just like me and my wife and a few friends that will make the teas that I'm making that taste weird. And after I taught, sort of like these long day classes for a bunch of years, um, the students who were coming to them, they're like, "Would you do like a longer course?" And I was like, "I don't know if how I would put that together and everything." And eventually, enough people asked me, and I started doing that. And again, I started doing it, and like I just kept doing it. And as time went on, I sort of like expanded it and like I would teach it and I would get ideas and like I can't fit that in. There's not enough hours. And so I made it bigger and kind of like grew it out to what it is now. So I have a course that runs April through October. There's 8 weekends of, 7 hour days. And doing that. And I have a comment to make about this next thing, but like we just started before the pandemic took off and shut everything, down. Like that December, we did, I think, our first like I did a class in person, and then we live streamed it so people could tune in online. And then we had the recordings of that class, which we started selling. And then the pandemic happened, and like everyone else, I was like, "Crap, what am I going to do to make money? Like, how will I pay my bills?" Like, oh, we'll have to like and also I have a course that's starting in a month,
Mhm.
and how am I going to make this happen when we're not allowed to get together? The students were awesome. No one really dropped out of that year in 2020. And they were all like, okay, we'll do stuff online. And I think we did the first 3 weekends or 2 weekends online, and then when we could meet outside, we just did the entire course outside. And then the year after that, I said like, my wife really was like, well, we should just do like an online version for people that can't come out. So now there's like an online version and then it's an in-person version. They're basically the same course, a little bit different because of the structures. But I want to go back to what you said is that I just remember, I mean, like all the way, not even the 90s, but all the way up to 2020 when the pandemic hurt, there were a lot of people saying things like, you can't teach online. That doesn't really count. Or you can't
Mm.
see clients online. That's like you're not a real herbalist if you're only, talking to people on the phone
I
or
heard it all.
Zoom or Skype. And I'm so glad that that has ended because I was like, because one of the things I was really active from the late 90s through probably now, before it was called social media, there were like these email listservs, right? So like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
American Herbalist Guild had a Yahoo group. Before that, Henriette Kress
It was like
had a
herbs
very
dot whatever dot.
Right, right. She had a very active email list, and I was always very active on that. And people used to say, like, "Oh, well, yeah, Jim McDonald's one of those internet herbalists," and I was like, "I do not think you're saying that in a way that is like complimentary." Like there
Yeah.
was a little bit of a dig in there, or maybe in some cases, like a really blatant dig, like that kind of work doesn't count. And I think it's interesting now that everyone's doing that, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I got emails from people, like actually like big herbal people telling me I was gross and disgusting because our classes were online. And I wasn't, I didn't have classes online because I thought, like, oh, this is the wave of the future. I'm so forward thinking. That was where my audience were. That was where the
Mhm.
people who wanted to take my classes were. They were military spouses or they were moms with kids. So that's where my audience was. And so they wanted me to be there. So that's why I went there because I don't think of myself as being like, any kind of tech, whatever, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's, I'm not. And so, like, it is interesting how that's changed. And sometimes I just want to be like, hey, 20 years over here, I've been,
Right.
don't tell me how the wheel works. But I
It
don't.
is. And I think that like what you were saying, like being receptive to the needs of the students,
Mhm.
that's what's in like that's of predominant importance of like if you're going to teach, certainly there is a like how can I teach best? What works for me? Because people can't really teach in ways that don't work for them. Like I don't do
Yeah.
PowerPoints because I am really bad at them. I did one time ever, and I was like, oh, people say that PowerPoints help keep you on track, but part of my thing is like I'm not really on track. Like I have an idea and I talk about that idea. When I get to the end of that concept or idea, rather than thinking like this is the next thing that happens, which I do sometimes, a lot of
Mhm.
things I think like, oh, I can go, here, here, or here from this endpoint. Which way do I want to go today? And a part of why I do that is because I don't want to get bored. I teach a lot of the same material.
Yeah.
Like the number of times I've talked about like dandelion on an herb walk is like it's a lot,
Oh, I imagine.
right? Hundreds or thousands. And so like sometimes I start with the flowers, sometimes I start with the roots, sometimes I start with the leaves. I might go into like one or another stuff, but I don't want to get it to be like where I feel like I'm reciting. And especially I've seen some teachers, and I feel like, oh, they do not seem like they love what they're teaching anymore. It's kind of like
Yeah.
rewind, tape, press play. And I don't want that to happen to me. And that's not This kind of seems like a judgment. It's not really a judgment. It's something that I know happens. And
Yeah.
so I'm trying to actively not do that. So I want to think about like, well, what can I do? What works for me? But then equally important is like, how do I figure out what the students want to learn and what I think that they should learn, right? Because those are often two different things. And
Mhm.
how do I help them learn what they want to learn in a way that I think is maybe more effective than they know exists. So
Oh, I love that.
most people, when they learn about herbs, and this is how I learned about herbs, um, they think, in one of two directions. Usually the first direction is, I found this herb, what problems is it good for? Or the other
Mhm.
direction is, I have this problem, what herbs are good for this problem?
Yeah.
And I mean, that makes all the sense in the world, but where I think of is that the whole idea of holistic medicine and herbalism that's practiced holistically is that we're not we are doing what everyone says, where we're looking at the person and saying like, oh, I don't want to just treat a cough, I want to treat your cough. So if someone
Yeah. Yeah.
were to send me an email that says what would I do for a cough, I'd be like, no idea, because I don't know what kind of cough you have.
Yeah.
And then I can say like, is your cough drier? Is it damper? Is it more spasmodic? That can be
Mhm.
like a starting place that most people can answer that question and then explain, you know, um, like why that matters. And that for drier coughs, we use demulcent herbs that are more moistening. And for damper coughs, we tend to use more aromatic herbs that are more drying. And for spasmodic coughs, we use relaxant herbs, And as long as I don't overcomplicate that, most people will get it because most people have been in a house where everyone was sick with the same thing and they all have it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
You know? And so for me, it's like the idea of herbal actions and herbal energetics, which I think, actions are here and energetics are here, and they sort of like fit together like that.
Hmm.
Um, I can explain that in a way that's not super complicated that makes people be like, I don't get it. This is over my head, by being silly and telling stories and having weird props like donuts or pool noodles or scissors or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they get that sort of like more nuanced understanding is a beginning place rather than learning the this or that herbalism and then studying herbalism longer and realizing like, oh wait, that doesn't work. And then now I need to go back and back.
Yeah.
And I think I'm gonna like paraphrase you. I don't think I can quote you. I think on one of the podcasts, and pretty sure it was Bevan's, you said something about like making like a tower with your kids, and if the foundation isn't good, the tower falls over.
A
And
strong
because I
base.
love it,
Yeah.
so i i
We use
love
that for,
analogies.
to this day. Both of them are first responders. And they use that principle on every like rescue, or because they do
Mhm.
all different kinds of, I told you they're wild and crazy, but they actually like, it's got to have a strong base, good foundation. Without the
Yep.
foundation, everything crumbles, blah, blah, blah. And my youngest son used those principles, became, I think, the youngest captain in the fire department
Uh-huh.
in North Carolina ever. That using that
Oh.
kind of stuff, being an unschooled kid. So
Uh-huh.
it just kind
No,
of like,
so
it's
when
so true in
yeah,
everything.
when I
Sorry,
hear
honey, I told all your business.
I know when I hear like a
They don't
really
listen.
like just a great analogy that takes an idea that it makes something be like really relatable. Because if you talk about like, oh, it's so important to have this foundational knowledge, to support the structures that you build on top of it, that makes sense to a lot of people. But everyone has built a tower or played Jenga or, done something like that. And when they have that sort of like visual, of like, oh, I know what that means. Like, I've had everything fall down because, the foundation wasn't strong, or I tried to stack up boxes and I put heavy boxes on top of boxes that weren't really full and the box collapsed and everything fell down. As soon as we have something that's so relatable like that, that analogy and that experience becomes the um like the anchor for the concept.
Yeah, yeah,
And so much of what I'm doing when I'm teaching is trying to like think what is the most relatable anchor for a concept. And I think, and there are people who they want to know all the names of the everything and all the different tissues and have to spell all the words, to everyone and like that. Um, but I really think, even though I can spell at least a lot of the words, there's a few that I've never quite gotten.
I
Um,
can't pronounce some of them, no matter how hard I try.
Same thing.
I'm like,
But
my students think I'm an idiot. I'll be like, like
I
whatever, I'm human.
I really like the gist of like, do you get the gist of it? Like, do you understand the
Yeah,
concept of it?
yeah,
Because
exactly.
I know that there have been things that I could say all the words. I had memorized them, right? I had learned
Hmm.
how to spell them. I could say all the words, but if someone were to be like, explain that in a completely different way than what you just said, I'd be like, "Ugh." And there are other
Yeah.
things where like I get the gist of it and I can say it in using several different ways of talking. But if someone said like, can you say all the appropriate advanced level, medical and pathophysiological terminology, I'd be like, I don't think that I can. I work with a lot of fevers, and pediatric fevers I have a lot of experience with. And I know that there's like these stages of fever, this stage and this stage and this stage. I could
Hmm.
not tell them to you right now because my stages of fever is like, imagine you're in a house and you have some unwanted house guests and you're like, how can I get rid of them? Maybe I'll just turn the thermostat way up. and I'm going to cook them out of the house. But if I turn the thermostat way up, I got to make sure all the windows are closed because otherwise the heat will just blow out of the house and it'll like stress out the furnace from running and running and running, and the house won't get hot. So I got to like turn on the heat and close the windows. And then when they if when they're starting to get like exhausted and wanting to leave, but they think maybe I'll stick it out and stay, I'm also I might just crack the window a little bit and then close it and let some heat out, crack the window and close it. So like I can do that, or I can talk about being in a car in Michigan in the winter when you have the heat up. Cars are changing nowadays, and you just put the number on.
Oh, yeah.
But
I just
like
found out my steering wheel has heat. I
oh
didn't know
wow.
that. I've owned it for a year and a half.
I was recently in a car that had like a massaging seat, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I'll probably have one of those in like 12 years, right?
I would never get one because I'd go to sleep.
Yeah.
I'd
So
be
I'm
like,
always I'm always trying to figure out like the gist of it. And I think that not in every single case ever, but in a
mhm,
lot of cases, like understanding the gist of it, like is more important than being able to say all the words and pronounce them properly and spell them properly. Like if you understand it and you understand how it works, it's okay. And maybe we can go back because we have the bond of like, our kids are unschooled,
mhm.
they largely figured out how to do all the stuff themselves, and they came up with different ways of learning than what conventional ways of learning are. And my kid who's in college right now is like rocking it. He's doing really, really well in college. And it's not because he learned the way that you're supposed to. Like he learned
He
a
learned
different,
how to learn.
yeah, he learned how to learn. He learned a way to learn that worked best for him. And now
Mhm.
he's able to apply that to different situations. And so if I'm in a class and I'm trying to convey a concept, often what I'm doing is I'm like, okay, there's the visual people, the visual learners, there's the story learners, and there's the give me the nuts and bolts of the concepts learners. And so I might run through something and like give okay, so this is physiologically, like this is the thing that's happening. And then have some silly prop like what do I have right now? I've got different things like a loofah sponge or the
You
balloons that
got
I
way
have.
more exciting stuff on your desk than I do.
Oh yeah. Like so I might do like, this is a piece of leather
Mhm.
um that is properly, it has the right amount of moisture. And so like it's flexible, you can squish it up and stretch it out and it mostly goes back to shape. This is the piece of leather that is really like dry. And so I bent it
Mhm.
once and now, it's got stiffness to it. So it doesn't really work. It doesn't want to stretch very much. And if I stretch it, you'll see those little tears on the surface of it. So people see something, and then I can tell a story about like a client that had something going on.
Mhm.
And those three things work together for different types of learners all at the same time, rather than being like, oh, I'm only going to tell a story, or I'm only going to use some kind of prop, or I'm only going to give the pathophysiology of it. And it hits most people well. It covers most styles of learning. So it's a good way. I get to see like when I'm doing it, especially if I can do it in person where there's a class full.
Mhm.
I can see people's reactions to like the way of explaining that works for them, which is
Yeah.
pretty good. And I would say it's like, so for me, um, when we switched to doing the online classes, and the first time that we did it, we just did a class where there were people there. Um, and then we had the recording of that class that people who weren't there were able to watch and then watch afterwards. And then when we wanted to record all the rest of the like modules for the course, we just basically did it where I'm sitting in this chair with this wall behind me, and there was not people around. That was so hard for me to
Yeah.
like,
It's different.
yeah, to say like there were two things. One is I talk in an endless run-on sentence, that
Mhm.
if you wrote it out, it would be really long. You'd pay
Some of
attention.
my lecture transcripts look like that.
And
I'm
then
like, oh.
if I messed up, we'd be like, okay, where can you pick up from? And I was like, oh, like 10 minutes ago, maybe. But the other thing is I am so used to from so many in-person classes and having people there. I'm so used to like saying something and then like scoping the room out to be like, did that land?
Yeah,
And when the
yeah.
only person was in the room was my wife, who, we worked together and, she was doing the techie stuff and the filming.
Hmm.
Even though she's in the room, if she's making a face, it's not usually about anything that I said. It's about some light, or some meter moving. And I'm just like, ah. So yeah, it's interesting the different ways of teaching.
We
And
have, oh, sorry. We have
okay,
in
no, go
the
on.
beginning of our program, I explain that sometimes it may feel like I'm saying it over and over again.
Hmm.
And I'm not actually saying it over and over again for you. I'm saying it over and over again for everybody's different way of learning. So
Yes.
I may have like a worksheet, or I may have a lecture, I may have the written material, we may have a slideshow, we may have a whatever, right? And that's because what I'm trying to do is to work with differing types of learning and abilities. And then occasionally, at the end of the course, I'll be like, do you have any comments? Or like, a few things you said a few too many times. And I'm like, okay, but you got it. So we're good. Because it's like, because you just, as we learn about how people are changing the way that learning happens, and
Hmm.
people are becoming aware, like, I'm a visual learner, I'm this, I'm that. It's helpful, I think, to just kind of try to preemptively get in front of it. But I always feel like there's always one more way I could do it. So you ever feel like there's one more way I could present it, or one more type of presentation I can do? The Heart of Herbs Herbal School podcast.
I so agree. I usually, one of the ways that I preempt things is if I know people are going to say that, because I repeat things like crazy. Like about magnesium and how important magnesium is. I think like maybe somewhere during the class, I'm like, today's class is brought to you by magnesium, you know, um, or demulcents. Um, but I let people know it's like, because it's usually not like repetitive, because I think people think like, oh, they said the same thing. And I'm like, no, I addressed the same concept over and over and
Hmm.
over and
Yeah.
over again, but I did not say it in the same way. So like maybe if there's a certain, like plant that we're talking about, um, it gets talked about when I'm doing like the big picture overview of how to understand the concept of energetics and herbal actions and how they overlap. And I might use that as an example. And then later on in the course, we're doing a field walk and we see that plant and I talk about that plant and I talk about some of the stuff I talked about when we were illustrating as an example. And then if the plant is like mullein, um, we talk about it related to the respiratory system. We talk about related to the musculoskeletal system. We talk about it related to infections, maybe in your ear. We talk about it in relation to urinary issues, and strengthening the bladder and helping with incontinence. And so all of those things get sort of like readdressed, but they get readdressed from slightly different angles. And I
Hmm.
think that that's good because the idea of,
I think it's important. It's
yeah,
essential.
there's one time that I'm going to say this thing, and if you miss it, it's gone.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't happen, and I don't think that that's good teaching. One of the things um, I have had some people, they'll be like maybe partway into the class, and they'll be like, I don't feel like I have like assess someone's constitution and the energetic states of all of their different organs and systems, and then know which herbal actions I should use and create a formula that is perfectly balanced for them. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that either all the
Welcome
time.
to the
Like
club.
this is like getting better at that is the
Mhm.
goal. And one of the ideas that I have is like I love the word wonder. And I love the word wonder because that's how I learn. Like that's the predominant way that I learn is I make time to sit down or lay down or walk around and just wonder open-endedly about stuff rather than being with a goal to like I want to learn about this and then know the answer to it so that I know it and I'm done and I can move on to the next thing. I tend more often to be like, I'm going to keep wondering about this issue and see all the different ways that I can grow my understanding of it without there being an endpoint of like knowing
Hmm.
the thing.
Yeah.
Because when people, not always, and there's certainly things that I'm not going to say that there's not stuff that I don't know. Um, I know that mucilage is a compound that is one of the ways that things can be demulcent if they have a lot of it. Um, but the problem with knowing stuff is that it can be an endpoint for people. They'll be like, "Oh, I learned this, and now I know it." And then at a certain point later, if you find something, or I'm just going to use my name or me as the example. If I know something, and then later on I find something that conflicts with that, I might get like dismissive of conflicting information. I might get defensive that like, oh, but I know this and this conflicts with it, so I'm gonna, not be into that. Rather than like being like, ooh, wow, my current state of understanding does not incorporate that. Like, I want to look into that and see if that can grow my understanding.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good way to learn. And if I have to say one of the things, and it's been happening for a while, but I feel like as more and more stuff has been taught online, um, people want to they want to learn so quickly. Like
How fast can I get through this?
I am an unschooled herbalist, so I did not take any kind of structured course with anyone, and I learned from a lot of different people. I never
Hmm.
went through anyone's structured educational course to learn the stuff that I now teach. Um, And it took me a really long time. And one of the reasons it took me a long time because I didn't take a course with anyone who could have just explained something to me in like 15 minutes. And instead it
Hmm.
took me like a couple years to figure it out and put it together. But that's okay. Like, and I think now when people are like, well, I can take a 2 or 3 year course and be a clinical herbalist. I'm like, I wouldn't be able to do that. I just, to me, it's like learning more slowly and not being in a rush to know all the things and to be able to do like the most complicated, like impressive herbalism. And sort of like what the most complicated and impressive herbalism is kind of interesting because it changes over time, you know? So it's like, oh, is it treating hypothyroid and endocrine disorders? Or, oh, is it treating Lyme disease? Or, now
Menopause is
menopause?
the big one right now, right?
Like I'm a trauma informed, herbalist and I can deal with all the different kinds of trauma and, having worked with trauma, I think like there's a lot of different kinds of
There's a
trauma.
lot of, we talk about trauma informed care, but it's
Yeah,
like literally the iceberg,
it is
the
because
tip. It is
it's
the
huge.
very snowflake at the very tip of the only icebergs we have left.
Yeah. So
You
like
know?
long COVID, everyone and
Yeah.
I understand, like of course we want to be able to help people with the stuff that they're dealing with. But I think, and we talked about this kind of before we started, I think that a lot of people they want to get to being able to treat the most complicated presentations, like the most like muddy mixes of all the thises and that's, maybe before they're able to deal with the individual things that make up that condition. So
Yeah.
if someone's trying to deal with treating like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD, you got to be really good at treating just regular coughs
Yeah.
before you can do that and being like, oh, well, when would I use this particular approach to treat a cough versus that approach? Am I also including, along with teas and tinctures and syrups, like steams?
Yeah.
Am I thinking about like, is,
Massage,
yeah,
cupping,
massage or
exercise,
percussion,
breathing
or
exercises, or
is this,
whatever. Yeah.
is this a cough that's actually like coming from the lungs, or is it coming from like post nasal drip that is irritating the throat and you're coughing kind of to scratch an
Is
itch?
it boogery?
Yeah,
I
right. So
use lots of formal language. And how's
great.
the boogers? What
Can
color
you
are
spell
they?
boogery for me? I need to make sure I'm writing this down properly. Yeah, so I think going back to the tower, like having really solid foundational understanding of what are the basics and basics are like foundational principles, not like beginner stuff.
Yeah.
You know, people will be like, "Oh, that's beginner herbalism. I already know that." And I'm like, "Oh, I just feel like most of what I'm doing is trying to refine my understanding of quote unquote beginner herbalism because I view it as foundational. And if I know that really well, um, I can handle a lot of situations, you know.
Oh, yeah, I
There was
agree.
a time, and this is a long time ago, decades back in my herbal learning. It was probably the first time that I had a consult with someone who was like really remarkably sick. They had lupus. I think their
Ooh,
lung functioning was like in the teens. And I back then I lived in an apartment and I was doing house calls or meeting people at libraries or coffee shops. And so I met this person at their house, and their ability to like get up from a chair and walk to the couch was impaired. And
wow.
I do remember thinking like, "Ooh, I am over my head." And I had this insight, and it's still one of the most important insights that I have had that I still apply regularly, which is just because I can't do everything doesn't mean I can't do anything. And I like took a breath and I was like, okay, I'm not, my goal or my expectation isn't going to be that I'm going to make his lupus go away. That's not happening.
Yeah.
So I can take
Yeah.
that pressure off myself and be like, what do I see? And what I
Yeah.
saw through observation and through listening and through, intuiting based on our conversation and listen, getting information was like his lungs were really inflamed. They've been inflamed for a really long time. The tissue was really, really, really dry. And dry tissue, to go back to that little piece of
It's
leather.
cracking that leather.
Yeah, that dry tissue doesn't, it's stiff. It doesn't want to stretch, right? It loses its pliability. And so when the
Mhm.
lungs want to, but the tissue is really stiff, there's that resistance there. And I was like, I think slimy respiratory demulcents would be great. And so I made a tea that was like marshmallow and plantain and mullein.
Slime, slime, slime.
Yeah, slime, 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 marshmallow and plantain and mullein. And that tea did so much good. It improved his quality of life so much. And
And
it's like,
that's so beautifully simple.
it's so like they're not
Massive
complicated
change from
herbs.
beautiful simplicity.
Yeah. They're not complicated herbs. They're not like, because sometimes just like being able to treat the coolest, complicated condition is like the goal for people. There's also the goal to use like the most
Every
like
exotic,
the the,
sexy,
the plant
whatever.
is like,
Yeah.
ooh, I'm going to use ghost pipe for this, or like, oh, I'm skilled enough that I can use like Rowolfia. Um, and there's a time and a place where some of those herbs are like the right thing, but a lot of it was just like there's something really simple and discernible with your senses that you can figure out that will that can really improve someone's quality of life.
Yeah,
And
I
that
always do the
person,
keep it simple, silly. I don't say stupid because they're my students, but like keep it simple, silly. Like if you overdo it. We also we talk a lot about look, you don't have to know everything. You don't know have
Mhm.
to know how to do everything. You need to listen to the person that's in front of you and then
Yeah,
find a way to make it compliant and easy and accessible. So
yeah. If
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 they're
a
like,
part,
I'll take one dose of tincture a day, make it count.
yeah,
Not everyone's going to do 47 things, you know.
I, I've had people that have told me like, oh, my last herbalist or my last herbal teacher, would come up with these formulas, and it was like, there's two teas that you need to drink, and this one tea, because it's got a demulcent in there and some aromatics, it's best to do like a cold infusion of the marshmallow root separately, and then combine it with a hot tea. And I'm just like, I understand why that makes all the sense in the world.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't even know if I would do that.
It's if you're busy and you have a life that we want to make
Mhm.
people's lives better, not another task or another chore or another when I talk to my students, I'm like, look, if you give somebody something where they cannot do it and they will fail, the healing stops.
Hmm.
because you're like, fine, I can't do this. Forget it. This isn't for me, and instead of, it's like everything should be just practical and simple or that's just what I think. I mean, I
I
think,
no, I'm so with you because if you come up with a protocol for someone, suggestions for them, and it's really not realistic for them to do, and then when they don't come back and see you, and I've heard people say things like this, like, oh, well, they just weren't really committed to their healing. And I'm like, well, I mean, could they have been if they didn't feel overwhelmed? Because if they felt overwhelmed with it,
or they couldn't afford it.
yeah, and then they come back to you, they're going to be like, no, I'm not doing the thing you told me to do. No, I'm not. They're going to feel like they failed. And
Hmm.
that just never needs to be what happens. And there are people who would love a multi-pronged plan with 1,000 things to do because they're meticulous people. But there's a really simple thing that we can do is we can ask them, like what feels doable to you? Like this is often what I do is like, these are my ideas. Like what feels doable? You don't have to do all the ideas at
Yeah.
one time. You can be like, let's start with like three things. Like, what are three things that you feel like you can do? Can you eat more greens? You know,
Can you
um,
stop using Splenda in your coffee?
yeah, can you eat more greens?
Or whatever.
Like, are you like, I know I'm an herbalist and I do have a thing where like if I tell someone to drink tea and they're like, I don't like tea. I also do the thing in my head. I'm like, I'm an herbalist. Tea is my thing. Like
Like tea, man.
that's what I do. But I will try to keep that inside my head and then be like, okay. And what I'm thinking quietly is we'll work on the tea thing. We'll get there. Because what it
Yeah.
might be is after I do something that they can do and they feel better from it, they will be more open to making space to make tea.
Exactly. I cannot agree with you more. I can't believe this is the first time we've ever talked. I
I
can't
know,
agree
right?
with you more. It's like when people would ask me, like, well, how do you make kids take herbs? Well, first of all, I would just be like, hey guys, you need to take this. If you want to feel better, this tastes
Mhm.
like, whatever. Just pound it. That would be the phrase that would get my kids to pound it, and then it would work. And then they would be like, give me that stuff you gave me to pound last time, because they could, pound it or put it in a popsicle, make it in their oatmeal. I mean, like there's so
Yeah.
many ways. It doesn't have to
Chasers,
be,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
what
exactly.
can you do a chaser?
Yeah,
Right?
we're all
Like,
new
oh, you
chase.
like this thing? Have that be your chaser.
Exactly. And it's just I feel like sometimes herbalism has gotten so regimented on how it must be performed and how we must apply and blah blah, and I'm just like, but we're human. Some people will go out and eat the plantain, other people are gonna make it into a tea, other people are gonna want it in an
Mhm.
oil. That's okay. It doesn't all have to be the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, that's the great thing about it too, right? It's because
Hmm.
it allows you to be flexible. It allows you to be creative. I mean, it's one of the reasons we say the art of herbalism is because there's so much personal artistry to it. I love looking at people's formulas. Like if I look at someone's formulas and I look like, oh my God, I would never have done that. And not in a way of like that well, sometimes. So sometimes it could be like, that's horrible. But a lot of times it's just like, that's just like so you get better at herbalism and you can be like, oh, I can see the reasoning in this formula and how they put it together, but I would have never thought to mix this and this and this, and that's just like cooking, I guess.
I love those moments though, where
Hmm.
I like see someone sting and I'm like, whoa, duh, why wasn't I doing that? I love that. Like, because I feel so much, I get to learn so much from those moments. Like, okay, I get it. Let me learn more. Let me figure this out a little bit more. Like, why did they do it like that? And I love those moments because it reminds me that we're not practicing in a vacuum. That
Right.
we're all different and we all have different ideas on stuff that's really important, interesting work. So I always feel lucky when my mind gets blown.
Yeah, it is great. It's one of the I mean, so you have this podcast, you get to talk to all kinds of different people and like I have ideas and thoughts about a podcast and just haven't put them all together because
Oh, I think you'd be great.
Yeah, it's so many projects trying to get them all done. But it like the interaction between people. And one of the things is when I started teaching online, to go back to the teaching thing,
Hmm.
I was doing it, and it was right when COVID was happening, and like I was learning how it worked, and people who weren't used to doing it were learning how it worked, and everyone had their cameras off, and I was like, oh, it's like I can't see people's expressions, I can't see where their stuff is landing, and then I just learned a few things, and one of them was like to tell people like, hey, like if you don't want to have your camera on because whatever, you're in your bathrobe or not, um, you know,
Yeah, I was gonna say nudie
like
woodies are
or
probably.
your house is really messy and there's laundry baskets around, that's totally okay. But if you can have your camera on, that would be great because it just helps me to see people's like facial expressions and reactions. And then people would put their camera on. It's like, oh, well, one of
Oh
what's
wow, everybody's house is a mess.
yeah.
We're all living in COVID.
Right. It makes people relatable. And I started doing this other thing is like in the online course, there's like videos that people watch, and then we have our Zoom discussion, of each little module that we release. And at a certain point, um, after the time frame of it would end, um, Stephanie would have to like save all the videos, and like do stuff downstairs. So we couldn't just stop everything and be done and go upstairs and eat
Yeah.
dinner. We'd have maybe like, a half hour to an hour of like saving the stuff and putting things away. And I was like, I'm just going to be like, class is over, but you can all turn your mics on. If you need to go, that's all. But you can all turn your mics on and we can just talk about stuff. You can ask me other herb questions you have if you're interested in that. You can, tell me about your cat. You can, like we
Hmm.
just have this open-ended conversation. And we start creating these like after banter. Like there's always after banter after the thing. And it was so awesome. And it wasn't something that like the majority of people did, but there were the people that stuck around, and there were some core people, and then some, people that would some days, or depending what their schedule was like. And it just like it filled in the space for me of like more of the back and forth, and like the conversation that I would get to have with students like before class or during lunch or after class, which was like the stuff that got cut out.
Yeah.
It made the whole interaction feel like a lot more like two-way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it made me feel like I was kind of getting to know some of the students. And so since we started that, we've just kept doing that. There might be, I think there was one time I'm like, I'm going to a concert. I need to leave like right at the moment.
Skedaddle.
Right.
We started doing connection calls, kind of.
Uh,
I just call them connection calls, and like, once or twice a month, I'll post it. If they show up, they show up. And we basically just kind of freeform talk about whatever
yeah.
anybody wants to talk about. And sometimes we'll, upload them to the student group. Other times they just kind of like, well, we don't need to use that for anything. But I think it's helpful because I think the more we're online, the further we are apart. And
Mm,
like as business owners, we have to be online.
yeah.
We have to be in those spaces that, you know, those spaces that you have to be in. And I don't want anyone to come and find me if I start putting out brand names of social spaces. They're coming for me, they're listening. But, it's the that has robbed us of a lot of connection by creating 30-second soundbite connection. And
Mhm.
so my intention was trying, okay, let's go back. Let's try to get back to real hours at a time connection versus, 3 minutes or whatever. And I'm glad that you're able to do the banter and the fun stuff with your students at the end
Yeah.
because that's important.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference. And, it's not that there's not truth to it, but it's so easy and tempting to say like, well, just, in-person classes are just inherently always better than online classes. And if I wanted to, I could I could make a case for that. But
Hmm.
then I think like I've got some great relationships with some of my online students, right? And even and way better than that, honestly, is some of my online students have great connections with each other.
I know some of mine have started businesses
Oh
together.
yeah, yeah. So
And
it
I
was
have some
like
students 15 years. They're still emailing me, telling me what they're up to. I love that. I'm not
it
sure I would have
is
had that face to face.
yeah, it is so great, to see that happen and to see like these friendships form. And then I think like, oh, like if I go back, even though it's a whole different thing, but if I go back to my late 90s email listserv things, like the old Yahoo group style groups, like some of the friends that I have now that I think were in-person friends, we met online. Like that was like the origins of our friendships were from that. And I've just kind of forgotten because we're just good friends now. And like I'm like, oh yeah, I met that person online. I met that person online. And so it's like there's the easy thing to say about, like in-person learning being better than online learning. And then I think there's the more well-considered thing, which also goes into access, is that there are access issues. There are people that would like to learn from me that just don't have the means financially or geographically to come to classes, but the way that I teach or, the content that I teach really resonates with them, and this makes it available. And like
Yeah.
that makes me happy. Um,
Yeah. I love that. I feel like I feel like the growing pains of early online has been worth it for what I've gained from it.
uh-huh.
Like long-term commitments to students and I have done in person. Actually my first in person was for the Department of Defense.
Oh, really?
Herbs and breastfeeding. I was pregnant with my first child and they paid me to teach a class to all the other moms.
Oh, that is so
So,
awesome.
I mean, it's just funny because like we have these, I don't think I would have, I don't think I would have drawn students from 120 countries if I
Hmm.
was teaching in person.
Right.
And that is a gift to me. That is like, I learned so much, like just from, well, this is how we use whatever in Egypt. And I'm like, what? That's so
That's so
cool,
yeah.
like, so I feel like I've gotten so much out of it personally, like just getting this variety of students I don't think I ever would have gotten before. So I understand the connection throughout time and space, like you can connect with so many more people in that
Hmm.
platform.
Yeah, and yeah, make I mean, if the goal is, or at least for my goal, is to like share information and share understanding and share, I mean, one of my goals in teaching and one of the reasons of why I teach is because I feel like there's information that should be more accessible than it is. And if that's one of my goals in teaching, then I should embrace different ways of making that be accessible and not be like, I want it to be accessible, but only in this way.
100%.
And
I
there's
agree.
also like, I mean, just really practically, um, doing the online course has really helped me out because one of the things that was a struggle before is like I only make a living when I am somewhere doing something. Like that's the only time that, any income is coming in is I am
Yeah.
somewhere else, and I am, doing something. And for the durations that I'm doing that, I'm making a living. And when, different people will structure online stuff, some people do all their online stuff live. And I was like, no, I'm gonna, like
I
record
couldn't do
content
that.
and have it be like solid, because I can make it be the way that I want, have the stuff that I want, which was tedious. Um, but I
But
wanted
you
to,
had ownership of it.
yeah, I
It
have
was
ownership of it.
you were holding your room.
Oh, yeah, because
Like,
prior to doing that, I've done online things for other people, which I'm not upset about because I like them and everything is cool.
Hmm.
But there was one thing that I did where I was away, and the thing was like, oh, you can make more income if we stream this while you're doing it. And I was like, oh, sure, why wouldn't I do that? And I think I learned like a couple years later that that recording was being like used over and over and over and over again. And I hadn't thought like,
Oh.
oh, is that something that can happen? I was thinking it would be like
Oh.
just that one class. And so it was like, oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, when we hire people to teach for us, we always do like a licensing agreement, like, look, this is how we're trying to be really clear, like this is how we're going to use it,
Uh,
so they know, and so they can come back and say, you're not paying me enough for that. You need to pay me more. And I
right,
go,
right.
okay, let's talk. But
Yeah.
that,
So
yeah, it's interesting seeing like the ways that different things are used.
there's a learning curve, but then I think like there's a learning curve with in-person stuff too, because a thought that I have, even though I kind of want to, I'm not going to out this person. There was a person I taught an in-person class for.
Hmm.
Actually, I taught a series of in-person classes for them. And at a certain point, I was like, I don't know if I really get on with this person the way that I would like to. And
Oh,
I
that's rough.
very specifically thought, it doesn't matter. I'm teaching for the students who are coming to the class and not for the person who's hosting them until they did not pay me. Like, three-quarters,
Oh,
more than that of a weekend that I taught somewhere. And then after that, I was like, oh no, like, I want to have a sense of like who I'm teaching for and what their um values or integrity for. So it's the
hmm.
same, like if it's not like online is different, it's just learning how to do that. And I think going back to maybe where we started, we're gonna, mostly focus on like teaching and educating people. There is the understanding and the knowledge that you have that you want to share with students. But in addition to that, there is learning how to teach and the way of teaching that works for you. I happen to be a very animated, extroverted, teacher I have, animal balloons that I use in classes. Um, I have, funny little props that I can scratch my head, with a little skeleton hand. But that doesn't need to be everyone's thing, So like,
Yeah.
what I can do is I can, teach the way that I can teach. And if someone said like, oh, could you, could you teach something like the way that Guido Mazzei does? I'd be like, yeah, no, I can't.
Yeah. No,
Totally.
that's okay.
That's not I'm not going to be able to teach something the way Kate Gilday does,
Yeah. Yeah.
who is so awesome and like a slower processor than I am. You know,
Hmm.
um, I can't do like meditations or visualizations before class because I'm too silly to pull them off, and I talk too fast.
I'm kind of the
Um,
same way.
so I can kind of like figure out like where my strengths are, and that takes a little bit of trying. I have tried some stuff and be like, that did not work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in addition to the knowledge and figuring out the way of teaching that works for you, some people are really great at PowerPoints. They do awesome PowerPoints, like
Hmm.
not me. So that could be it. But there's also like the practicalities of how do you make this work for you? Like,
Yeah.
is there a way that you can, practically make enough money doing it so it's worth your time? If you're doing it,
Can you do it long term this way?
yeah.
Like, you don't want to get stuck with a style you can't live with.
Right. Can you do, if you're doing in-person classes, like where are you going to do them? Like, is there a place you can do them? Is it really expensive to rent a space? Is it really, like if you want to do herb walks, where are you going to do the herb walks? Is there enough parking? How
Yeah.
wide?
Yeah.
Like I do a lot of herb walks. Is there enough
Well,
parking?
is there accessible pathways,
Yeah.
or is
How
there,
wide is the
who
trail?
is going to be coming on the walk with you, or do you have to be
Are,
wheelchair
are,
accessible or whatever?
are
And there's
bikes
lots of
going to come
things.
whizzing by,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
interrupt your thing
On the
every
left.
15 minutes, which is something that I've done, I remember when the pandemic happened, everyone would be spread out like 6 feet, even outside for a while.
Over
And
here.
there was this narrow boardwalk that we would walk across with all of this poison sumac on it. And I'm like, the boardwalk's too narrow to get the group of 20 odd people together to look at the poison sumac. And so during lunch, I just took like sidewalk chalk and I wrote like little arrows
Uh,
on each of the wooden slats where there was poison sumac. And then I like walked ahead of everyone. I was like, poison sumac, pass it on, poison sumac, pass it on. And you see the arrows pointing to them. That was really fun to do, actually.
that sounds fun.
But yeah, just figuring out the practicalities of it because one place I went to do a walk, like all the plants I was going to talk about, even though the walk was going to be like 3 hours, every single plant I was going to talk about on this loop trail, we would see within the first like 30 yards. And I'm like, okay, I can space it out. But people were like, what about this plant? I'm like, we can't talk about that plant yet. I'm like, this is like,
Not there.
it's a beautiful trail and it's a great trail, but like, that's not the trail that works best for the plant walk that I'm going to do. So,
Yeah, it's hard.
but
You've got to really think about things, and then nature needs to be on board.
yeah.
Oh, well, we were gonna bloom this week, but we
Oh,
decided not to.
oh yeah, that happens.
The climate's changing and things are popping up at different times and
There's a place I do walks at, and it's a big, beautiful field.
hmm
And there's really just like two loop trails that kind of maybe look like maybe they're set up like like dragonfly wings or like damselfly wings.
hmm
So there's actually sort of like four loop trails, but let's just put the like a loop this way and a loop this way. And we get to meet back where we started at lunchtime. And they also do like dog training stuff in this area, and they also do
don't eat anything, guys.
horse
Just
stuff in this
like
area. And so I had to like look at the schedule to make sure that there's not like a horse thing or a dog thing happening at the same time because that'll be hard to co-navigate. But sometimes they will mow the edges of the trails. And so like I had scoped out this park, like 2 weeks before I was going to do the walk there. And then I hadn't found the right place to talk about mullein because where I found it was like too far and it was the July walk. I wanted to talk about mullein. So I went back there the night before the class and they had mowed like maybe 4 feet in from all the trails and made them really wide. So that was kind of nice, except they had mowed over everything that was on the edge of the trails and I had to refine
Mullen
out
loves hanging out on the
all,
edge.
yeah, I had to refine all of the stuff that I
Oh,
could talk about. And so another
oh,
practical
okay. So
consideration
just
is,
right there, everyone who is listening, right? He said, I had to go and re-find everything, right? That tells you the quality of teaching because some people would have been like, guess what? They mowed, sucks to suck. I don't know what we're gonna do. And
Mhm.
you were out there probably until the sunset looking for what you needed to find
I
to
actually
help
was out
people
there
out. Yeah, no, I can see it. I'm seeing
until
it
it
in my head. Like,
until it was dark.
yeah,
Uh, Walking really fast. And I was stressed out about it. And at a certain point, I mean, I was totally stressed out about it actually. At a certain point, I was like, I've been walking around a beautiful field
for
for three
work.
for 3 hours now. That's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
Um, but it is those things that happen when you've got something planned and then you leave and you've forgotten your handouts or you leave and you've forgotten the stuff you're going like I don't have my animal balloons, what am I going to do? Those things are going to happen.
hmm
There
Absolutely.
there's going to be days that you're like, oh, I just I have class, this weekend. I'm teaching, all day Saturday and all day Sunday, and I am not really feeling it. And that's understandable, but
Yeah.
also like, I don't know, like I think about like if I were to go to see a band, if I were to go see like, Kansas, play,
hmm
they're playing on a day that I'm teaching this year. Crap. Um, and they're, maybe not having like the most super on day. I don't want them to play and be like, well, I'm not really feeling it today, so I'm not really going to try so hard. I want them to be like, I'm going to play the best I can for where I'm at. And for
Yeah.
for me as a teacher, I think the same thing is like students especially the students that I have as an herbalist, they would be really understanding if I'm like, hey, I don't feel like I didn't sleep well last night. That people are generally, pretty nice and understanding about that. But I'd rather like just figure out how to do the best job that I can.
I
Like
agree.
if I'm a teacher, my job is to offer classes and teach them as well as I'm able whenever I'm doing it and not kind of be like, eh, I'm not feeling great, so I'm not going to try so hard.
Yeah. No, and I think that's an important thing because I always say I don't students don't need to know anything wrong with me
Yes. Yeah.
because it's nobody's business. I need to give them my A game every day, even if, I'm pooping my pants in my face. I'm just like not on, right? And because, or, I didn't get sleep last night, or my dog died, or whatever. And I can say this is going on. But I also, a long time ago, I was like, it doesn't matter. It matters to me. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter to anyone else what's going on in my life. Like, they don't, and of course people care and people are, would compassion. And I'm sure there'd be plenty of empathy and all that
There
kind of
would be
stuff.
a lot.
But it's like, I don't need to bring that into the mix. So I love that you pointed that out. Like, it's okay to be human, but also bringing your A game is what helps everyone, I think,
Mhm.
in the long run. Or did I completely,
No, I mean, I
totally
really
turn that
feel like
about
that
me?
because, oh, I love Kansas. So most people know Kansas from like, Dust in the Wind, Carry On Wayward Son. They have so many good songs. They have amazing prog band. And there was a stage where the original singer, um, he just was like, he didn't enjoy it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember being at some shows where like him not enjoying it anymore was so completely evident. Like he was not trying really hard. You
Yeah.
could tell that he didn't want to be there.
And you get like mad. You're like, dude, I
I
want you to
I
enjoy it too.
I sort of like stopped going for a while,
Yeah.
And the rest of the band, they were really into it and everything, but I was like, I don't want to like, I mean, like I felt bummed out. I'm sure he's so sick of playing Carry On Wayward Son, right?
Carry on
Um,
my way.
oh, very good, yeah.
There you go.
Um, like because they play how many times have they played that?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
no one wants to go and hear their favorite song played by someone who is playing it like I'm sick of playing this. I'm like, why would I try to play this well for you? Is it mostly about how sick I am at playing it? Like we all want that, and I carry it, and it has nothing to do with not being compassionate for yourself and where you're at. It's just sort of like if you're going out there and teaching, and someone might have invested a lot of like going to see an herbalist teach a class. It might be the first time that they've done that. Like, yeah, do your best for them.
They may have
It has
borrowed
to
money
do,
to be there.
yeah, it
I
has
mean,
to do
like,
with if you're deciding to be a teacher, like always doing your best, I think is one of the unnegotiables.
yeah.
It doesn't have to do with not being compassionate with yourself. You can totally be compassionate with yourself, but you can still do your best while you're doing that.
Yeah. I had to learn a huge lesson teaching. I am very direct via email. I'm the worst emailer in the world, right? Someone will be like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yep, sounds good. And then they'd be like, are you mad at me? I'd be like,
Uh-huh.
what do you want? Where'd you get that from that? Like I had to learn a whole other language of communicating because I was so direct. People would take it as I wasn't friendly or I wasn't nice or I didn't care. I just was like, the answer is yes.
Uh-huh.
So I had to like really teach myself. That was something with working online early on that I didn't get for a long time. It really took me way too long to be like, girl, you need to be a little bit more friendly. People think you're a stick in the mud. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't have that problem. I have people ask me a simple question and I'll start writing like it was a dark and stormy night and blah 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 and blah blah blah
I
blah blah
love that.
blah and blah
I'm
blah blah
working on
blah
that
and blah blah
level.
blah 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 and there's parentheses and semicolons and ellipses and they're like, is it okay like if will I be able to find you if I show up to the walk 10 minutes late? Like da 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 da. I could be more concise. Yeah, it takes, I mean, there's the knowledge, going back to summarize, there's the knowledge of the material you're teaching. There
Hmm.
is figuring out the way that works for you to be able to teach it. And then there's just the practicalities of like the nuts and bolts of like, how do you make this work?
Yeah.
So because I do so many walks, like parking lot size matters. And I've been doing walks for over 25 years, and
I
two
was gonna say I've known about your walks for a long time.
2 years ago, and I do a lot of walks. I do tons of open community classes. To me, that not everyone that is an herbalist, some people get to a point where like, I'm just going to teach herb students. I just do tons of open community classes because I enjoy it.
Hmm.
Um, 2 years ago, I found a place to do a walk, and it's on the other side of the state from me. I went to a whole bunch of different places and I quizzed some people, and small parking lot. And I was like, I know how to get around that. I'll use Google Maps Street View, and I'll look across the road, like directly across the road. There's a street, and there's street parking on that street, so you don't have to park in the small parking lot with the
Hmm.
reserved for community gardeners signs. Um, you can park on the street. And then the walk was starting, and of course, like even though I had that in the email, and even though I was like really explicit about where you can park, people were showing up, and people parked in the um, reserved for gardener spots.
Oh man,
And
so
then
you got that
it
blowback
was fine.
instead.
It was fine because no one was out there gardening until we got back from the walk and we saw a bunch of people in the garden.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh no, they, they got there and all the things were
Bro.
full. Eh, So when I thought I found a basically what I'm saying is I thought I found a workaround. And what I did not account for is human nature. Is people pulled in, they saw a spot, they parked there. They were kind of like right on time and everything was starting. And because everything was starting, I needed to be focused on like my classes starting now. And they
Hmm.
decided not to go and park across the street and walk back. They just stayed there. And then when I got back at the end of the walk at a certain point, someone who was not on the walk was like, "Are you Jim?" I was like, "Oh no, it's the
No,
gardener busted." Yeah. So
that's him over there. He just left in the Subaru.
find places that have enough parking.
For real, for real.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. Scope out the
So
walk.
we have kept you. I think this is one of the longest interviews I've ever done. And I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but we
Oh,
should probably let you go
well, it
because you probably have a life to get back to. But where can people find you?
so I was supposed to do that in the beginning, wasn't I? My herb
You
site.
referenced it a little bit, but
Okay.
let's make sure.
Thank you for keeping me on track. Woohoo. Um, my website is herbcraft.org.
Okay.
And depending on when this comes out, the new version, you can look at it on your phone, so much easier version might come out. Or be coming out soon. It will be coming out soon, regardless. So um, that'll be really nice. And that site has all of a ton of free articles, like lots of free articles. I think hundreds of pages worth of free writings and plant monographs and things on treating back pain or sinusitis. All that I put out there for people to have so that they can get an idea of like the way I teach and where I'm coming from and whether that resonates with them, and then hopefully sign up for a class. Right now, the in-person classes are mostly listed on herbcraft.org. And then there's another site, herbcraft.podia.com. So Podia is Podia. Herbcraft.podia.com has all of the online stuff. There's a link from the herbcraft.org site to get you
Okay,
there.
cool. We'll make
I
sure we
have
link in the description of the
Cool. I
podcast.
have lots of 2.5, 3 hour or day-long classes that I
You
do.
do a ton of classes.
I do a
You
lot of
do all
classes.
different kinds of structures for like everyone. I was looking at that. I was like, that is so cool. I just was like, oh, I never thought of like,
Yeah,
I'm just like blown away. I love
lots
it.
of classes. And I've got a course, and I go and teach weekends places. And I'll be at a few different herb conferences this year, and every year usually I can make it to a few herb conferences. So all of the different like wherever, if you can come and see me teach somewhere, that would be great. Say hi. Um,
I get nervous going to herb conferences.
there's a lot of people there.
Well, it's not like so a few years I taught at one after 9/11, and we had
Uh-huh.
family in New York, and so I went and I taught, and I was like, I gotta go. Like we got like it was that weekend. I was like, we've got people and they were not happy with me at all. And
Uh-huh.
it kind of my scared me. So
Well,
I'm like I get a little chicken shit about conferences. If I'm invited to teach, I'll like go and teach and then I leave. Like or I won't hang. I'm so bad. So I'm like I want to go sometime just like and just go. But then I get nervous and I'm like, well, I'll have to bring my own van because I don't want to like I don't want to be in anyone's it's so
uh-huh.
stupid. It's
The,
so
the
ridiculous.
the thing that I
But
do,
I'm just
in
weird.
case I do this with anyone here, is I'll be
Okay.
at a conference and I'll start hearing other people be at the conference and be like, oh, we should have lunch, and oh, we should have lunch. Like, oh, let's get together like for lunch and hang out. And then I realize that I've made plans with more people than there are lunches. Like there's no way that I can actually fulfill all of the hangouts.
You need to rent a restaurant, have lunch with everyone.
So yeah, that's one of the things that I have learned in sort of reeling myself in is like not to over promise like what I can actually do, because I really am genuinely enthusiastic. Like, someone's like, oh, I'm gonna be there. I'm like, totally come and, have lunch. And then I realize like, oh, I gotta be careful about doing that because I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, he said we do that and he totally bailed. Um, it's more like,
Yeah, I just get so shy and then people think I'm mean because I'll be like,
you're not really coming off as mean. So
It's funny, I don't in this kind of
uh,
situation. But I mean, I think the whole resting face was named after me because I'll just be like, and people are like, what's wrong? I'm like, nothing. I'm just listening. And they're like, well, it didn't sound like you liked my lecture. And I was like, no, I liked it. I just sit there. So I've got, that's what I'm working on with the
uh,
podcast. And I'm working on that. I'm trying to be a better human being.
oh yay.
But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like
So,
my own emotional weirdness. Sorry.
yeah. So those websites are like the two websites. There's a ton of stuff on YouTube. There's just
And there's
I
lots of interviews with you out there.
there are.
People love interviews with you, and I can see why as an interviewer. So
Oh, good.
I think that's awesome. Thank you so
That's
much for being here.
that is so much better if you're like, people love doing interviews with you, but I'm not sure if I get it.
No, they do.
Uh-huh.
You wouldn't be interviewed by everyone if they didn't.
Yeah,
Hello.
I like people. I like talking with people. I like, connections, I like making
Yeah.
connections. And so, yeah,
Well,
this is nice. Thank you for having me on.
I would love to have you on again sometime.
Oh,
Just I know you're busy, so I will be emailing you at some
I'm
point. I love to do follow-up interviews with people. That's like our next season. I'm going to follow up
next
with,
season.
yeah.
Are you still repeating things? I'm like, nah, I don't do that anymore.
Nah, we're just repeating guests, people. But no, but because I like to see where people are going. Because some of the first interviewers were students who have businesses, and so I'm going to go back and be like a year later, like, how's it going? Like,
Oh, that is so
I want
cool. I
to,
mean, I
because
think
I'm
that
so excited.
one of the things that's so cool about that is um, one of the things if you're a teacher, one of the things eventually you learn about is like being aware of the power dynamic of like teachers and students, and that is something absolutely be aware of. But then there's also like sometimes I think about it like my students are my employers. Like the reason that I have so much gratitude for the people that come into class. And the reason that when we were saying earlier that even if I'm not feeling great, I just want to do the absolute best that I can for them all the time is because they're the reason that I can do any of this. Like if I offered classes and no one was showing up, I'd be like, I guess this is not going to pan out. Right. And for people to invest their money and their time and their attention, to be a part of whatever I do, whether it's in person, online. Like, I'm so grateful because that allows me to do this. Like, I'm able to
Yeah.
share the learning and information and insights that I have because people are supporting me in doing that. So like, um, when you're saying like, you have students and then they branch out and then they start doing stuff, being able to like shine attention back onto them, and what they're doing, like it feels so good. And there's something really also awesome. You see how you like this is never going to end. I'm gonna keep going.
No, it's never going to end with me.
Um, is like people who are your students at a certain point, like I don't really feel like they're your students anymore. They're, like they're your colleagues now.
Yeah. They're your peers, or they're your
Yeah,
inspiration to try something different because you saw something that they did and you're
yeah,
like,
it's
oh,
so
or
cool.
you're paying them for a service.
Yeah, it's so so cool. When I think
Yeah.
about like the people who have been in classes and see like the things that they've gone off to do in different ways. And, and again, you're not looking at like, oh, they're my student and they're able to do that because of me. It's more like, oh, wow, look at the cool direction, that they have gone off into. I'm so honored to have been a part of, that journey.
Little bit of their,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, look at that gumption, like, look at that, Oh, it's so inspiring. And I really feel like everything in my life that I've been able to get is because they put their faith in me. Oh
Yeah,
gosh, I'm gonna
totally.
start crying. That's another reason why I
I
probably
know,
shouldn't do it in
right?
podcast. I'm a anyways, like, with all seriousness, like if we had 200 people enroll in 1998 when I opened
Mhm.
my doors. 200 people took a chance on some girl they met on a Yahoo group. Like,
Uh-huh.
with all seriousness, it was just like, my husband's like, I'm not sure this is gonna work. And I was like, we're gonna do it. And he's like, okay. Like, because this was just so foreign. But like, that fed my children.
Mhm. I
Literally fed my children. It
the
literally, you know. And
the
then they
impact
stuck
of
with
that
me when I
support.
moved to Europe. Our
Yeah.
students stuck with us. It didn't matter. So yeah, I totally resonate with that. I
Yeah.
I literally feel they've been the building block that I have built my foundation on herbally, and that connection is something that I fight for them.
Mhm.
Like, I'll fight for you. I believe in you. I want you. I want you to exceed all expectation. I want you to shine bigger and better than Bevan Cohen. He went
Mhm.
through one of our programs. I mean, he's trained with a million people. And we just were interviewing him for the podcast for his new book. And I can't tell you how excited I am. I went and bought like 5 copies. I'm so
Uh-huh.
excited for him, right? And it's not his first book, but it was just like, it was the first one where I got to interview him about it. And so I'm like, oh, when this book comes out, I'm going to give it away to some students. Like, I got all excited about it because I feel almost like a grandma.
I
I'm my own grandpa.
I know we're supposed to be ending and wrapping up,
Yeah,
and I'm so
yeah.
sorry. But it was maybe 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I was thinking like I never get to go to anyone's classes. Like, like I'm always teaching, and then when I'm not teaching, I mean, I really do because I teach a lot. I want to spend time with my family and all that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just want to like go and be in a class.
Mhm.
And that day I get this email that Bevan Cohen is teaching in a library like 15 minutes away. And I look at my calendar and it's like in the evening and I'm not doing anything. And I'm like, I'm just going. And so I like got there and I go into the library and I sit down and he gets there and he's talking to people and he like looks up and sees me and then like, oh, he recognizes me and I'm just like wave and he's like, oh, hi. And he goes back to doing his thing. And one of the things it was like that I appreciated so much, it was really, really great, is like he just did his thing because one of the risks that I have if I show up in someone's class is, oh crap, I could inadvertently make them nervous, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
I felt confident that he's like a really stellar teacher. He was going to be okay, and that wouldn't be an issue for him. Um, or that they can like draw attention to me, and I'm not trying to pull attention away to
Yeah,
anyone
yeah.
else's class. And he's got like an overlapping group of people, to like the more specific herbalism crowd that I tend to draw.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so it was really great, and no one in the place like recognized me. And but his class was great, and like he was so solid, and his teaching style is like really engaging and empowering. And it was, yeah, he was. It was such a delight to go to his class, and I got to hang out and linger afterwards. In the parking lot with him until he needed to like get going. I probably did the same thing to him that I'm doing to you right now, which is like
That's fine. Kindred
perpetuating the
spirits.
conversation. But like, yeah, all props to Bevan. He is a stellar dude.
Yeah, no, it's I love seeing all the advances in our craft and all of the new thought processes and different kinds of brains doing things. It's not just like one person, one herbalist rules them all or whatever,
Right.
right? It's like there's lots and lots of like different voices out there from different cultures and different, that was one of the things I loved when I could travel. We did like 22 countries with our kids as part of their education, but I could go anywhere in the world and connect with someone about herbs
Hmm.
because we knew the Latin names and we could jive on that, and it's just, I love how it's opening like that. The world is opening, and I'm so inspired by all of our students, I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I'm just so grateful every single day.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to sound like a cheese ball.
It's all because of you out there. Like you
Yeah.
out there, we're gushing now because
Well, it's true. It's
yeah.
true. I mean, my students do not realize that. I mean, though, when I started Heart of Herbs, I think we made $13,000 that year as a
Mhm.
couple. Um, and my husband was out of work. I mean, like, I wrote Heart of Herbs with a baby on my lap, breastfeeding. I mean, like, it was like a jump in the water, and they were my water. They believed in me enough to give me a shot, and I'm still here, and I love it. Um, you know, I just think it's something to be really grateful for. I think all small business, and I do like to say like small business owners, because that's what we are. We're business
Mhm.
owners when push comes to shove. And I think that we are the bedrock of our country,
Yeah.
like small business, we got to support all of our small
Small,
businesses.
wait, small, micro, like mini businesses.
I'm sure there's a few herbal billionaires out there. I don't know, but it's not me.
All
I've heard the rumors, guys, and they're fake. No,
right. Right.
but you're not going to write a book and make $1 million. Well, I'm not gonna. But anyways, I should probably let you get on with your life. And
Yeah, all right. I'm a total delight chatting with you. And if this can happen again sometime soon, I'm all about it.
oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I want to talk to you about so many different subjects, and I know our students are absolutely like adore you. So we have certain people that we suggest that they do follow up education with, or
Mm.
side by side education, or check out this perspective. And you're always on the top of our list because everything I see from you is so impressive. The responses around COVID were so impressive, and compassionate. And I had always been a fan and read articles and stuff,
Mm.
but that really cemented to me that you were different and that I understood your walk. And I don't always understand people's walks. So,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't, I'm, a barefoot girl 90% of the time. I don't always understand your walk. But anyways, but I'll let you go and thank your family for sharing you for so long with us. We really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And where can we find you again?
Herbcraft.org is the best place to go to.
All right.
Start looking for stuff that I do.
Yeah, it's all there, people. So definitely herbcraft.org. And that's
Yep.
herbcraft.org. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful
Very
day.
well.
Interested in learning more? Visit heartofherbs.com and enroll using coupon code PODCAST to save 20%. The content provided in this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or medical condition. It's always recommended to consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, lifestyle, or health regime, especially if you have an existing health condition. Any of the financial information and advice for starting or maintaining an herbal business is just that, information. It's not used to be a guideline on how you should run your business. Contact the appropriate professionals to help you to have a successful business.